Is it better to retire in your prime or to keep fighting, playing whatever sport you are until you cannot do it anymore?
That is a fucking wild one, Andy. Just to put it into context, ladies and gentlemen, Andy does not tell me these questions. He tells me what sport we're doing, and he told me general. So I didn't know what it meant. Didn't know I was going to get to this. I'm going to use my MMA perspective. You have to retire somewhat to your prime. You see guys like Khabib get talked in the GOAT conversation when he only had 3 title defenses. You see, I'm trying to think of other sports. I mean, Megatron retired pretty early in his career. Andrew Luck, yes, guys like that, and they get talked about, for history. I mean, Megatron. Listen, Megatron, even if he played those years, is still going to get talked about. But especially with a sport like boxing, especially with a sport like MMA, when you get those 4 losses, 5 losses, 6 losses, your mystique fades out. I mean, we're seeing that right now as we speak with Tony Ferguson. I mean, Tony Ferguson, before Justin Gaethje, literally the second best lightweight of all time. You could make that case. You can make second, you can make third. Now as we speak, I mean, I've never heard anyone even speak to him to that regard anymore. I mean, he's lost, that's 6 in a row. He's hitting to his 7 against Paddy Pimblett. But that mystique goes away. I mean, you never want to see that. But then you have your caveats, like Larry Fitz. I mean, Larry Fitz never dropped the ball. And if he did, the sky is falling. I mean, it's never going to happen. But Larry Fitz, he played on until, he eventually just started wearing out. And he still gets, the notoriety that he deserved as, the greatest football players who never win a ring. But, I mean, he was able to perform until he couldn't, until he didn't feel like it. So I do think it's a mixture of somewhat later in your prime and also, when you can kind of feel your treads leaving a little bit. For legacy terms, that's what you should be doing. For, passion, play until you're 60. But if we're talking about what people are going to remember you for, no one's going to want to remember you. Everyone's going to remember you from your last fight, from your last match, from your last game. And you don't want it to be a very shitty game. You don't want it to be a very shitty match. So I would like, once you feel the treads leaving a little bit, to retire.
I thought it was a great question because it's so up in the air. I mean, you see fighters that, whether you want to do UFC, MMA, boxing, whatever it is, I kind of like it where it's like, look, if you lose 3 out of the last 4, I think you should retire. I don't care what sport it is, you gotta retire. And speaking on boxing terms, we see fighters such as Lennox Lewis that just absolutely retired in his prime. He's knocking out fucking everybody. Tommy Morrison, like these names that he's compiling is insane.
And he's considered one of the most underrated heavyweights of all time. I mean, that is a guy that no one gives him credit because he beat up Tyson. He beat up everyone's star boy, and everyone hated him due to it, and he was an American. But when you look back at that career, that is a top 5 heavyweight. That is a top, I mean, you could argue top 3. This guy looked amazing, and he retired before anyone could even put a question about him. I want to tail it to soccer. We have 2 GOATs right now, Ronaldo and Messi, and they're not done, but they're also kind of done. They are done when it comes to extreme level of competition. They're no longer in the top 5 leagues. Ronaldo's no longer in the Prem, no longer in La Liga, no longer in Serie A. Messi's no longer in Barca. Messi's no longer in PSG. But they have the passion enough to still play the sport. So what do? Ronaldo says, I'm leaving with money, goes to the Saudis. Messi says, I'm leaving with money and chilling with Florida with my beautiful wife, and goes to Miami FC. And you still get the passion that you like. I mean, they love the sport. I mean, they don't need to play anymore. Messi can buy all of us. Ronaldo can buy all of us twice. I mean, they don't need us whatsoever. They don't need the sport, yet they still do it. Why? Because of, love. They still love playing the sport. And so they would rather go to those lower leagues that, yes, I mean, you're not going to win anything spectacular, but you accomplished everything. I mean, you accomplished soccer already as we speak. The only thing Ronaldo doesn't have is a World Cup. Messi finally achieved that, and he said, I'm going to Miami. I mean, he doesn't need anything else. Get an MLS trophy, cool, whatever. It's not going to be something that people are going to talk about, but he is still doing it for the passion, and people love it. I mean, I will tune into an Inter Miami game when there's nothing else on. I would love to tune into a Saudi league, but where the fuck would you find those matches? I mean, the overall aspect of going to a lower league to perform the sport that you love is somewhat exciting in those terms. I mean, as much as people hate it, this new boxing thing that's going on with, we had Mike Tyson, Roy Jones. I mean, that fight, if they were in their prime, I would love to see it, but obviously we don't. Those fun fights were those mystery fights where people come back once or twice. Yeah, you're not going to get those, you're coming back for the title shot, blah, blah, blah. You're not a George Foreman, but, you can perform and people will love it. People will get the nostalgic ability. Yeah, is sometimes it's going to end sour like Vitor Belfort or Evander Holyfield. Yeah, it's going to look disgusting, but you get the passion of those old heads going, my favorite fighter is about to fight right now. Like, you get that jitter again, that sort of shake. Every fight fan knows it. Every hardcore sports fan knows it. That right before you're playing a very important game, a very important match, you get that little shake. You get that little nervousness in you. And you will get that for those types of matches, those charity matches, those charity fights. And I think that's perfect. If you want to retire early or retire when your treads start going off and then do one of those matches, do those exhibitions. I don't know if you saw Eden Hazard the other week gave an assist to Mbappe's dad. I mean, obviously it's not the greatest match in the world, but to see someone like Eden Hazard, we all know and love and understand the level that he's at, to see that charity match, it's like I get to see one of my favorite players play again. So I think that is also a very big help to these guys when it comes to the actual passion of the sport, because usually it's the passion that is never going to leave them. You train your whole life for the sport. I don't want to lose that. So they keep fighting, and it sometimes just wears off on their legacy. So I think it's definitely the passion aspect when you get to those competitive boxing matches, and that will help them. I'm kind of rambling, but it's just I'm trying to explain the fact that those types of fun matches that gets people on their feet is a great way to let these guys fulfill their passion of the sport without actually, getting battered by a young, hungry 23-year-old or a team that's ready to win a Champions League.
Yeah, I think it was said pretty well. The only thing that I feel as though is different is whenever you're talking about the fight game, it's so difficult to drop a league or go to a lesser league because of the nature of the sport, right? In boxing, you can go to WEC, WBC, whatever you want to, it's still the same thing, right? You're still trying to knock the other guy's head off. But I do like the idea of those expedition fights with Tyson, Roy Jones. That is where we can start to see, okay, I'm dialing it down because this is the end of my career. Or even you have some people like Khabib going into coaching after, while you're still getting all that love in the sport, but you're actively not participating in the way that you did. So it is a little bit different, and it is a little, with football, you really couldn't do that as well, but maybe that's something to explore where we have these, these fun matches, these charity matches, like you said, to kind of keep everyone still enthralled, but understand, your time is over, this is the stepping stone for someone else, so give them the light. But something I didn't know, did you know that Lennox Lewis beat Klitschko? I did not know that.
Lennox Lewis is one of the most underrated boxers of all time. I mean, that guy literally he's completed boxing. He was undisputed champ, beat Mike Tyson, beat Klitschko, beat Morris. He beat everybody. He beat every single hype man that was there at the time when heavyweight boxing was at its lowest, because Tyson was just starting to tread off, especially when Lennox Lewis beat him. It's like, holy shit. We're seeing a turning of the guard. And then after Lennox Lewis, when he retired, Klitschko took it and went to Germany. So that was a really dark age in boxing. So no one really appreciates what Lennox Lewis did. But whew, when that 1-2 hits and the legs of Lennox Lewis as a heavyweight, I mean, that guy's underrated, and no one talks about him because of the pure hatred of the fact that he beat up Mike Tyson. Because like when you go to Buster Douglas, you can call it a fluke. You can call it, Buster Douglas was just motivated. Lennox Lewis left no question at all that Mike Tyson was not fit for him, was not going to get in that ring and walk out the same. I mean, Lennox Lewis put a beating on him, and no one liked him for it.
And that's exactly what I wanted to say. Before anyone could put a question to it, then you see the other side of it. You see the Mike Tysons, the Roy Jones Juniors, the ones that are getting knocked out 2-3 times in our last 5 fights. The Muhammad Ali's lost 2 straight and then retired. I mean, it's sad watching these perennial goats of whatever sport it is just take L's, and they're not retiring when they should be. They're not the Andrew Lucks. They're not the Megatrons. They're not any of these high-profile people, the Usain Bolts. They're not doing any of that. Essentially, they're just doing it out of pride, and they're doing it because, unfortunately, they love the sport way too much to give it up. And there has to be some divide where you have a John Jones type thing where you take time off, or even your GSP. I mean, GSP retired at the top, took time off, came back to say, hey, I'm still him, and then retired again. I mean, like, again, we're talking about unicorns here, but anytime that you can do that, I think it's most optimal. And it comes to a point where if you know, like you said, the tread is starting to fade, you gotta hang up the cleats.
Guys, let us know what you feel in the comments, whether it's to retire early, whether it's retire later. Let us know how you feel about those fun matches, those charity matches. But please like, subscribe. Let us know what you guys want to see next. That's always a possibility for us, but it's been studs.